Let's play a little game. I want you to think about your favorite novel. Why do you love it? Why does it stick with you? I'm willing to bet that it has something to do with the protagonist. There's just something about the protagonist that resonates with you. Something about the protagonist that makes you feel excited and that makes you feel really connected to the story. Why? Because the protagonist is the lens through which we enter the story. The protagonist is actually the decoder ring for every event that happens. But what makes a protagonist memorable and unique? What makes readers fall in love with them? What makes readers want to follow them around for 3 to 500 pages? In this episode, we will dive into those questions and a lot more. Hello, and welcome to the Speculative Fiction Made Simple podcast. I'm your host, Heather Davis. I'm a book coach, a developmental editor, and a fellow storyteller. And this is the show that's all about how to brainstorm, write, edit, publish, and sell a powerful speculative fiction novel. And maybe just change the world too. Okay, it is time to get controversial. Are you ready? All great novels are character driven. In fact, Tiffany Yates Martin, a phenomenal developmental editor, wrote in her book, "Readers don't care what happens unless we care who it happens to." I know what you're thinking. Wait, Heather, you coach speculative fiction. Speculative fiction novels aren't really known to be character driven novels. That's more like literary fiction. But the truth is, these days, all novels are actually character driven. Now, this might seem counterintuitive because a whole lot of fuss in the writing world is made about plot and plot structure and pivot points and turning points. And honestly, that's for good reason, because plot is exciting and plot is showy. But the truth is, in all novels, even speculative fiction ones, it's actually the protagonist that is driving that plot. They are literally the decoder ring for every single event that happens. We are traveling around in their head and they are interpreting their world for us. And it's their decisions that create the unfolding situations that we call the plot. So, if your protagonist is as boring as limp toast, then readers aren't going to want to follow them around and spend 10 to 20 hours with them. Oof. That means if you want readers to stick around and read your book and recommend it to their friends, you need to develop what I call a magnetic protagonist. Okay, I'm going to get super controversial one more time. Your novel isn't about what happens. It's not about the plot. Instead, it's about how what happens affects your protagonist and forces them to change in a very specific way. That's why it's called the transformation machine, because it's literally there to transform your protagonist into someone new. So, in order to have a novel that works, in order to have a novel that really excites readers, you have to know your protagonist pretty well, and you have to give them room for growth. That's what makes them a magnetic protagonist. But in order to have that magnetic protagonist, you need to know some foundational information about them. And this information has nothing to do with their favorite color, their favorite food, or their favorite childhood toy. Instead, it has to do with things that are much deeper, much more personal, and much closer to the novel itself. Now, let's dive in to the 7 things you must know about your protagonist in order to make them magnetic to readers. I'm going to word these 7 musts in the form of questions. And if you want to grab the workbook, please go to manyworldswriting.com/magnetic. I have all the questions listed there and you can just follow right along. And there are some other goodies in there as well that you don't want to miss. In addition to having that workbook, we're also going to have an example novel that I'm going to use for these questions, just so you can actually see how it works. I've decided on The Hunger Games because 1, I absolutely love the novel. And 2, and more importantly, most people have either read the book or at least seen the movie. So you'll be able to get an idea of what I'm talking about because you actually know a lot about the protagonist, Katniss Everdeen. Okay, question number 1. What are their personality traits? You can list their personality traits just as adjectives that can describe them. So if I'm thinking about Katniss Everdeen, I'm thinking about maybe she's tough and independent and she's fiery and she's resourceful and she's prickly and she's hard to get along with and she's very focused on taking care of her family. So those are all ways that I can describe her that really help me to concretely put down like what is she like? If I were Suzanne Collins, that would then play forward into every scene and every situation that I put Katniss in because she would be acting in accordance with her personality traits. Question number 2. What is their decision making style? So, for Katniss, her decision making style is very conservative in that she's never going to make any risky decisions. She's not going to do anything that puts her family at risk. She, in fact, is going to only make decisions that are in service of keeping her mother and her sister safe. So that means that even when, for instance, Gale suggests that they run away from District 12 before the reaping, so there's no chance they could be picked, she shoots that idea down and says, come on, we have families to take care of. We both have kids, meaning their siblings. So all of her decisions will center around, is this going to help my mother and my sister stay safe? Question number 3. What is their goal? What do they want? Now, this can be a little bit tricky sometimes for writers because goals can change during the novel. For instance, a lot of times you'll see the goal of the protagonist be one thing before the inciting incident and then change to something else after, while other times the goal kind of remains the same and it's really just the stakes that are raised. For Katniss, the goal is like the umbrella goal is really the same. Before the inciting incident, all of her decisions and everything she does is all about taking care of her mom and her sister. And after the inciting incident, where she volunteers as tribute instead of her sister Prim, it's still really about taking care of her mom and sister. That's why she's trying to win. I mean, yeah, she doesn't want to die, but there's actually something more at stake than just her dying. It's this idea that if she does die, her mom and sister will likely die too. They could probably starve to death. So her goal is again it's very single-minded, going back to her personality traits and her decision-making style. Her goal is going to be that she wants to do whatever she can to get home so she can continue taking care of mom and sister. Okay, question number 4. What is at stake if they do not achieve their goal? There has to be something at stake. In fact, the bigger the thing at stake, the more invested your readers will be in the outcome. For instance, Suzanne Collins could have made the stakes pretty high and just left it at Katniss wants to live because, I mean, doesn't everybody want to live? But honestly, just self preservation, it's not that lofty a goal because it's more of this sort of an animal instinct for survival. But there's this bigger goal that she has, this more selfless goal that really makes the reader connect with Katniss and want her to achieve her goal. So the stakes are if she doesn't win. Of course, number one, she just dies and probably horribly and brutally as well. And that's not good. But that second thing at stake is what really gets us. If she doesn't go home, mom will probably check out again and then Prim will die. And we already care about Prim because Katniss cares about Prim, and we don't want that to happen. Okay, question number 5 is what is your protagonist's misbelief? Now, this is kind of a tricky topic. A misbelief is something that your protagonist believes to be true about themselves or about the world that was probably true at one point, but isn't true any longer, and it's not really sort of universally true. And whatever this misbelief is, it's really holding them back and stopping them from living their life to the fullest. It's causing their life to have flaws and it's causing their life to be limited in some way. If we look at Katniss, she definitely has a misbelief. If we look at Katniss, if we analyze Katniss, she definitely has a misbelief. Her misbelief is that people are innately not trustworthy, they are not dependable, and therefore you have to just take care of you and yours and not rely on anybody else. She doesn't see the interconnectedness of all of the people in all of the districts. She is so short sighted in that she's only worried about her mom and her sister instead of understanding that her mom and her sister are like everybody else's mom and everybody else's sister. And this is a lesson that she has to learn. Question number 6. What is their novel specific backstory? Okay. Notice how I didn't just say backstory, I said novel specific backstory. That's because there's a whole lot of backstory for your protagonist that you don't actually have to know. I know some writers who want to sit down and write down everything about their protagonist. And that's fine if that's the way you write. But what you want to really find are 2 to 3 very important key memories that helped them to develop their misbelief. It's these core memories that make them into the flawed, misbelieving person that they are when we encounter them on page 1. And it's these memories that you're going to sort of grind up and sprinkle throughout the novel so that we as readers really understand the protagonist and start to empathize with them and feel for them because we know that they're flawed. We know that they have a misbelief and we know that they have to grow to be the best version that they can of themselves. But we also know that there's a reason why they are the way they are. And we feel bad for them and we want them to get over that past event and get beyond it. For Katniss, there are 2 things that happened in her past that caused her to feel like people are untrustworthy and not dependable, and that she just has to look out for her own family and nothing else. The first one was that her father died in a mining accident. We just get little snippets of it in the first chapter. It's not a lot. It doesn't necessarily have to be a lot, but it's just enough that we understand she felt abandoned and very alone after her father died. But not only that, after her father died, her mother had a mental breakdown and was no longer able to care for the family. Her mother's mental health got so bad that she stopped getting food for her children, and Katniss and Prim almost starved to death. In fact, it's only because Katniss started actively taking care of the family and going to find food for them that they didn't die. So not only did she lose her father and feel abandoned just by that huge loss, but then as she was still grieving for the loss of her father, her mother abandoned her in her perspective, and she was left alone to care for her sister. So now Katniss just doesn't feel like she can trust anyone. Even the parental figures that were supposed to take care of her didn't. They failed her. So she's not going to trust anybody else to take care of her. She's not going to depend on anybody else. She's going to be tough and independent and prickly and all of those things that make her, not really the kind of person to endear themselves in a contest like the Hunger Games when she might have to appeal to people in the Capitol. Okay, we have arrived at question number 7. And this goes along with the idea of that character arc. Like so far, we've been talking about everything on the one side of the arc, where the character starts, right? Who they are when they arrive on page 1. But now I want you to take a glimpse into the future because this is what you really need to know to guide their journey. Okay, you need to know question number 7. What is the new belief that your protagonist must achieve by the end of the novel to make their life better? Now, when I say make their life better, I don't mean that it always provides them with riches and provides them with the way to get that goal that they really want. I mean, sometimes they might not get the external stuff. They might not actually achieve the external goal. They may or may not. It doesn't matter. But it's really we're talking about internally. If their misbelief is one thing, they need to get over that misbelief and achieve their new belief. So the new belief is the undoing of the misbelief and sort of the healing of the wound of all of those events that happened in their life that formed the misbelief. For Katniss, she has to begin to see the interconnectedness of people. She has to learn to trust people. She has to learn to depend on them. She has to understand that it's not just about her trying to take care of her mom and her sister, but it's about taking care of all of the people who are like her mom and her sister. And we begin to see that with Rue which is the little girl from District 11 that she suddenly realizes, oh, she's very much like my sister. It's sort of an embodiment of Prim there. And she starts to see, oh my gosh, the people in here are just other people's moms and sisters and such, right? And she starts to trust Effie Trinket, and she starts to trust Haymitch, and she starts to trust PETA, and all of these characters that she doesn't feel like she should trust in the beginning. Slowly throughout the novel, as events unfold, these characters are showing her that they are dependable and that they are trustworthy. And this helps her to become the type of person who can now stand up against the Capitol and say, hey, I'm going to fight back, and I'm not going to necessarily be the wise and conservative decision maker. It's about more than just my family. It's about justice, and it's about freedoms. Okay, so when we start thinking about that, then we can think about the novel in this whole new way. It's not really about a fight to the death game, right? It's really about a girl learning to trust and depend on people and stand up for what's right, to stand up against an unjust system. So that's her character arc. And we can begin to see how that sort of guides the events that Suzanne Collins decided to choose for the novel. Okay, writers, don't forget to grab that workbook that you can find at manyworldswriting.com/magnetic, or you can go right to the show notes and click on the link. And remember, if you enjoyed this episode, if you found it helpful, please take a moment to follow or subscribe to the show and share it with a writer friend. And if you do, my little fuzzy blue hair troll, which sits kind of over there over my left shoulder, she's going to think you are awesome. And everybody wants the troll's approval, so, I'm just saying. Until next time, keep writing, keep dreaming, and remember, the world needs your stories right now, so don't you dare give up on your novel or yourself. See you next time.